get started, just know how much I love the viewing audience because I am not watching the Broncos game right now. Nope. Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and of course, our very valued patrons. Thank you so much for coming back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you do dig what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe, and of course, know that goes a long way in promoting the channel. I want to thank all of you that joined us last night for another Love on the Left, where we discussed the non-romantic, for a change. We discussed why men have less meaningful platonic male friendships. That episode is up now if you'd like to check it out, as are all our main shows on YouTube with playlists for every show we've done in order of appearance. I shouldn't say every show we've done, every visual show we've done. For those that don't know, this show started off as an audio-only show 6 years ago. Just a brief reminder that if you do dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on air, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become a patron or paid YouTube subscriber, you get access to the champagne room, and of course, our movie nights for as little as $3 a month or a one-time payment of $30 for the year. You get the satisfaction that your small donation goes a very long way in keeping TIR on the air. Now, let's talk about why you guys are really here. Memes, as they say where I'm from, or memes, as you Americans say. A big fear I have about this current era of hyper-political engagement is how young people have learned to translate complex, nuanced political histories into memes, flattening theory into instantly recognizable images. The meme has become the modern propaganda poster, compressing ideology into digestible aesthetics. It's efficient, viral, and it works. But it also becomes a form of self-branding for the neoliberal hyper-online subject and identity performance rather than in politics. We've entered a stage where politics itself has been subsumed into content. The meme, like the commodity, circulates endlessly, its value determined by engagement rather than substance. And just as in Debord's Society of the Spectacle, the image replaces the real, politics becomes an endless scroll of representation. What can we learn from this? How do these memes, many of which seem ironic, apolitical, or even balanced, actually reproduce 80-year-old libertarian and conservative ideals? How have they positioned the free market individualist worldview as the true political center, erasing class solidarity and collective struggle? Our guest today, host of the Doom Scroll podcast and writer of the Doom Scroll Substack, Joshua Citarella, has been studying how these viral languages shape our understanding of ideology. In a recent piece from his Substack, he writes, quote, "In its philosophy of design, the political compass is meant to individuate and atomize quiz takers. Rather than grouping like-minded people into similar blocks, it has the implicit effect of magnifying the small differences between subjects who are relatively closely aligned. Its purpose is to visually illustrate the minute disagreements between members of any potential coalition and to break apart solidarities among those who might otherwise work together. The organizational unit of this meme is the individual, not the collective. It's a powerful ideology frame that's been working for more than a half century," unquote. Today, Josh and I will unpack how memes, grids, and other visual political models, rudimentary tools that claim to simplify complex ideas, actually serve as the aesthetic scaffolding of neoliberal ideology. They don't just represent politics, they produce it. So please welcome friend of the show and host of the Doom Scroll podcast, Joshua Citarella.
Hey, Jason. Good to see you. Good to be back.
Dude, great to have you. I hope that intro was worthy.
Your intros are always fantastic. You've got, you really nailed it on that one. You're probably the best intro writer in the game, I have to say, actually. It was really, really on point, actually. No, it's very good. Yeah. And I'm stoked to see you again. We've been trying to put this on the books for a while, so it's great to be back.
Yes, we have. And first and foremost, I want to say in front of the entire listening audience that I am extremely proud of the success that you've had through the show. I don't want to say like I discovered you. When I mean that, I mean that in a very literal sense. Like I
You were
was,
in on the ground floor, I gotta say.
but
You really were.
I was doing something. I was doing what I usually do on a Monday, which is cut clips for the show. And your video came up for a talk you were giving, I think in Southern California. And I was like, who is this dude? And I went down a Josh rabbit hole and found some of your artwork, found you very interesting. You agreed to come on the show. And we've kind of been talking and stuff ever since. Sadly, I wasn't able to make it to New York recently. Because I do want to just, hang out with you in real life and shoot the shit. But the show has had so many personalities on it. Some people I call friends. You've had Catherine Liu on a couple times.
Our mutual friend, Catherine Liu.
Yeah, very close friends with the whole family. You kind of start the show off, if I'm not mistaken, with your interview with Catherine. And that interview catches
Catherine was
fire.
number 2. I think Grace from True and On was 1. Yeah, she was episode 2. She was number 2, and then we had her back for like 25 or something like that.
What was the whole thinking behind doing a show where you're getting away from what we're doing right now, which is multi-screen? You're actually talking to someone in the same room. When you decide to do that, you're already cutting off a large majority of the people that you can talk to. That's a brave, bold move. It's a move that I feel like you had to sketch out for a while because it's a multiple camera show.
Yep.
And again, I love the way it looks. I love the flow. I love the editing. What was the thought process behind the show?
I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's always helpful to reiterate. When we first started doing Doom Scroll, we initially set out to do a 12-episode miniseries. And so in my mind, what I wanted to do was ultimately to make a documentary. Some people have watched the Fukuyama interview. That was a real unbelievable. I never thought I'd be able to do that one. Very exciting. And I think it's really resonated with a lot of people, actually. Surprisingly, they think he's, totally foregone. But if you, look at how he sounds now, he sounds like a kind of, 1970s social democrat in many ways. But before I get too distracted on this topic, the initial premise for the 12-episode miniseries was that you mentioned some of the previous meme research I had done. I wanted to make a kind of Louis Theroux style, meet the people behind the accounts, and then talk to all of these, mostly young men that I had interviewed in like 2018 to 2020. And now they're adults, and see like, how were they politicized in this media environment? How do they choose how to vote? And, I maintain conversations with these people, but the Doom Scroll interviews were going to be talking heads spliced into a documentary. They were going to be the expert interviews. So there's a kind of similar, rotation of questions that I'm asking, because I'm also trying to build up clips to then eventually make this documentary. And, to my great surprise, those episodes just performed, I think, literally orders of magnitude larger than any of us had anticipated. Like, we uploaded the Brace episode, which was number 1, and then Catherine was number 2. And I would have been happy if we got 10,000 views. I thought like, oh, that'll be great. It'll be a really, really big point of discovery for the Substack.
It felt like, hey, look, I don't think I'm saying something that isn't known. Catherine counts her views. Catherine is a view counter.
She's gonna be pretty busy, because I think it's close to 500,000 now on that first episode. So it reached very, very far. Yeah.
How was
it? I've thought about this a little bit, because it is, statistically irregular the way that the show was launched. I think probably what benefited it was that we were talking to people who, in many cases, had built-in audiences, some of whom
Mhm.
did, but many
Mhm.
did. There was not high quality video content of these people giving long form interviews. And then also I had privately, already been podcasting, interviewing and publishing podcasts and newsletters for like, like 4 years before that. And so we were sending tons of external traffic to a new YouTube channel. And that just allowed it to kind of jump up in the algorithm and then to find people who are curious about these ideas. So I think in hindsight, it wasn't necessarily planned, but it certainly had all of the necessary ingredients for the recipe to make the thing work. And then clearly based off of those first 12 interviews, we decided that we would put the documentary project on the back burner for a while. I've been working with two producers, Riel Rockdector and Clark Filio, who are dear friends of mine for years and years before. And we thought, okay, this podcast is working. Let's build that out. We can build an audience, and then a few years from now, we can make a documentary, and we know what people will be interested in it. So we now are at episode, I think 35, and we're going to release 36 next week. So it's lasted for 3 times longer than any of us expected, but yeah, we're happy doing it.
I also love the fact that you don't do a lot of press before the release. It feels like the new way to release music as well. Before,
Yeah.
back in the day, right? I used to have a publicist many moons ago, and it was like, okay, when you get the record, I need 6 months lead time,
Yep.
and I need all your tour dates because no one's going to talk about you if you're not touring. There were these steps you had to make before anyone even was going to look at you. Not so much anymore. Beyonce drops a record with no warning.
Yeah.
Everybody does it nowadays. And your show is similar in that regard, where there really is not a lot of Instagram branding beforehand. It's just like, here's the episode, here's the person. And what I like about it is it's not so much about the person, but the conversation that you're having with the person. I said this off air, that I compared you to, I guess a modern day kind of Dick Cavett, where I just want to see Dick Cavett talk to people. Does the person matter? Yeah, I guess to a little bit, but also the interviewer matters a lot. And how are you going to engage with Grimes opposed to music journalist X that's just going to nod their head to the ridiculous shit these people say, and not even ask them anything outside of the realm of what they can ask through a publicist. So, some of the conversations I see you have with people, you're a little more comfortable with. Those are always going to be better. I think Catherine, Amber Ailey Frost. But you had a conversation with a cat that I didn't really know about. Is it Healy? Is his last name? He was a singer.
Matty Healy.
Yes.
1975 to 1975. Yeah.
That was a fascinating talk.
He was great.
Very
He was great.
captivating speaker. When we talk about musicians with good politics, this man's name never comes up. Why is that?
Yeah, it's funny because there's very few musicians of that level of success, stature, and audience who will talk to you not through like a management rep or a PR person or something like that, and also to just come out and like make a bunch of political statements that they don't need to. They could afford to just like shut up and not have to say anything and be successful and leave it at that. But I think, as is evidenced in the interview, was like Maddie was really raised in this kind of like post Thatcher UK, where particularly his dad's story was like there was a living memory of what the UK was like before neoliberalism, and so the kind of disappearing possibility for creative life where you could work part-time, the cost of living is low, you are subsidized indirectly by social democracy, you can kind of wait tables half the week and then go about your weird creative art practice in a decommodified way. You can play in a band, like basically as society was privatized, that capacity disappeared from society. And I
Mhm.
think if you really, well, this is my contention actually, and I think this is probably what Maddie himself would say, is that like if you really care about art to the degree where like this is a lifelong pursuit in art, music, poetry, what have you, I think you can only come to the conclusion that there's no possible like billionaire funding or institutional grants or whatever. The best creative ecosystem is just social democracy, and anything else is subject to aesthetic stagnation, where the art gets really stiff and boring, and you have what Fisher described as like the 21st century is 20th century media on high definition screens. Like everything is very familiar, the genres are old, the material is like boring and stagnant. And so if you are living a life that's devoted to art, you know, there is really only a political fix for those aesthetic crises. And I think that's, you know, more or less what we discuss in the episode. And we're paraphrasing a lot of that from Mark Fisher's Ghosts of My Life, one of his later very influential works.
Hauntology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which coincidentally enough, I will be discussing tomorrow or Saturday.
Oh yeah. Okay.
For a show about
cool.
the end of poptimism, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
With journalist Sam Jennings. So I don't want to get too much into the Fisher stuff, but that whole conversation I found interesting. I am a fan of Fisher. I came across him, you know, later in life. He had already passed on by the time I discovered capitalist realism and some of his other works. But again, that conversation I thought was fascinating from a standpoint of you have a pretty well-known musician. I'd heard of the band, but I didn't really know their music. And you're having this really interesting conversation. And I'm looking at the view number. I'm like, I hope more people watch this. This is a good episode. But you go from, you know, a super
I think that
arty
might be
cat.
the second biggest episode. Yeah.
Oh, word. But how big is this Grimes episode?
It's actually, I mean, this is a good topic for us to dive into a little bit later, but the Grimes one is actually, you know, it's only a week old or so as of the date of this recording, but it is not doing incredible numbers. I think because in particular, the audience that we have accumulated doesn't want to hear her perspective on a variety of things. So it's a real slow burn in the algorithm, shall we say.
You are so silly. You also interviewed, and I don't want to spend too much time on talking about who you interviewed, but my head spun around like Linda Blair when I saw you interview Mike Israetel. And the reason why is because it took me a lot of persuasion to get any sports coverage written about in Damage Magazine. And this is not meant to be a slight to them. There's an audience that they have, and that audience is not football fans.
Sure.
To write, you know, 2,000 words on Shedeur Sanders and the privatization of college sports for a leftist publication to finally, you know, after 3 weeks of edits go, we think you have a point.
Okay. Yeah.
So for you to go, hey nerds, I'm going to have the biggest fitness influencer that you have no idea who he is, who's been dipping the toe a little bit in the political content, as a lot of people do.
Yep.
The more famous you get, if you're, no matter whatever you do, right? From Theo Vaughn to Mike Israetel.
Everybody's got to do it now.
That I trust, that have personal trainers that enjoy, I shouldn't say enjoy, isn't the right word, that like what Mike has to say, because he is an open steroid user. As far as workout plans, you yourself have gone on what the young people call a fitness journey to get fucking jacked. And you've gotten fucking jacked. So
naturally, I should say.
No, you can look at his little arms, you can tell it's not. But Was that a push for you to get Israel on, or was the whole team like, oh, this will work?
It's been it's been a learning experience in terms of what the audience reception is, the style of the show. I'll call attention to a piece that I wrote on Substack. This is probably, I don't know, 6 months ago now, but intentionally when we started the show, I wanted to interview like a very wide spectrum of guests. Like I wasn't trying to create another editorial program that talked to, my specific echo chamber of like the politics that maybe you and I share. Like I'm a subscriber to Damage Magazine, for example, but I understand that my views are, a relatively thin slice of the pie in, the grand spectrum of internet politics. And the piece that I published on Substack was called A New Pipeline. And so intentionally starting the show, what I wanted to do was to like build up an audience that was very heterogeneous, that was not just people who already agreed with me, but I wanted to reach out to recruit, to shave off some of the audiences of these people who specifically disagreed with me on a lot of things, but could watch the show, would watch maybe one episode with a guest that they cared about, and then get interested in the back catalog and eventually build out a kind of political education pipeline where those people could, through exploring the archive of episodes we had published, find the, for example, Jen Pan episode, the Vivek Chibber episode, the Catherine Liu episode, the people that I'm close to, I'm really aligned with, and whose work I really care about. But I think it actually does behoove any leftist, I mean, anyone of any political persuasion, to talk to people that they disagree with, to test your own views and to find out what you really believe in. Because if we allow certain dogmas to be erected, things are beyond questioning or interrogation, then we become really flimsy ourselves in our arguments, and we fail to convince people to bring them to our side. So, yeah, I mean, it has been. It sounds great as a theory, right? But then the reality of how the YouTube algorithm works. These are really slow burn episodes where they will perform in some cases at a quarter of what other episodes might do that are, more aligned with our regular viewer base. So I see them as long-term investments. All of that said, we're going to kind of go back to our core audience and talk to people who are maybe more on my side of the political spectrum for the next few months. But I'm glad that we did kind of venture out into the wilderness and talk to a bunch of different people. Grimes specifically, like her style of talking about art and weird future casting stuff is actually not that dissimilar from the art milieus that I came up in. My political position is kind of quite clear and is in some ways very different from hers. But like talking about what the 21st century is going to look like, talking about weird tech stuff that's going to shape politics, I'm super familiar with that conversation. I find it actually to be very important. And I think, I mean, if anything, what you can learn from some of those episodes is like, where are the blind spots of big political currents that maybe people in our camp or the Damage Magazine milieu are not yet talking about, but could be very influential. So for one thing that comes to mind as an example, crypto is now trillions of dollars of stateless capital, and what it means to struggle for social democracy within the framework of neoliberalism, where now you have in a meaningful way capital that is not tethered to the control of the fiat banking system. That just gives capital an incredible amount of leverage, and it makes social democracy much harder. So I think things like that are good for us to be aware of and to talk about.
So go watch Josh's episode with Grimes. Stop being difficult, guys. Someone asked, this is rather funny. Hey, what the heck, crazy pull? When is Jason Miles going to be talking about Pogs on Doomsday? I think Josh wants to keep having a show, and if the first
that might be a paywall episode.
Yeah. It's just like everybody. We don't know why the subscriptions just plummeted. Like, you guys just start talking about the big booty white women, and it was just over from there. But I'm excited for when you have an episode coming out. When?
We actually we just shot one today, so hopefully we'll get this out. I don't know, in the next early next week. We are. I mean, we're probably the slowest production pipeline because we're doing I don't know, just a lot more work. Like the level of production for the thing
Yeah.
is nothing is automated. Like we color the episodes, I do the sound myself. There's this incredible editor, LJ Frezza, who does like, he cuts everything by hand. Like we really care and craft these things. So our turnaround time is like a lot of other shows. They get it done in like 24 hours. It's going to take us the weekend at least. So we're getting quicker about it, but it's a pretty heavy lift.
That's not bad. Are you real strict about time though?
We've gotten a lot better about it. It used to be, super, super slow where we'd have to shoot things in advance. But we try to stay on the schedule. I think that's kind of as much as you can make the commitment to your audience. It's like digesting the things that happen in like this crazy period of politics and news cycles. Like you are kind of making a commitment that you're going to analyze these things along with your audience. And so if you disappear for too long, it feels like you're kind of betraying that trust. So we try to be timely about it, but it's also just, there's only so many hours in the day and eventually we have to sleep. So.
I mean, are you going to give yourself a season as well? Like the thing about, I was talking about this with Ben Burgess. I was like, we don't have seasons in this world.
Right.
And I don't think people
Right.
watch these shows with the intent that, at a certain point of the year, they're going to run reruns.
Yeah.
It's just
right,
not what you
right.
do, right? You feel like it's,
Yep.
again, back to the music metaphor. It feels like what it's like to be in a small band where you can't just release a project and tour every other year. You have to be in people's faces all the time because once you go away, then someone else is there. So,
Right. Right.
is this what you're going to do through the winter? You're going to try to give yourselves a break because it is a lot of work. You're not sitting there, just off the cuff riffing with people. I do believe the paper in front of you isn't sketches and tic-tac-toe matches with yourself. I do believe that
you don't think I'm doodling during that?
I think there's a few doodles in there somewhere, but I think overall it's like, okay, because like me, the screen is below here, but in front of me is a teleprompter with a list of questions. Sometimes people answer those questions in advance. So
right.
I don't have the ability. If you scratched off, you look smarter, right? But you can't see me right now.
There's a little bit of theater in the
right.
Yes.
You can't see the remote control in my hand as I'm going. Don't answer the third question.
About this idea of seasons, like I haven't solved it myself. I mean, I think right now, like we're in such an early stage that it feels like if we took a bunch of time off, it would just feel like, well, what happened? We just got our legs, It's like we just started, hitting the right pace and everything. We're trying to scale up. We were doing every other week, basically since we started. And what we are, the schedule we're on now is about like 5 every 2 months. So we're publishing 2.5 episodes rather than 2 episodes a month. So we've made some progress towards that. But I think, before we take any time off, I'd like to do that eventually, but we're just not at that place yet. We have like a lot of work to cover. There's a lot of things on the show that I feel like we haven't even really gotten to yet. We've actually just we've hit the first, like lap around the sun, literally. We're now on year 2 of the show, but the editorial line and the topics that I want to talk about and the things that I think the show is specifically designed to address, we've just started to talk about some of those things. So until we make more progress that way, I wouldn't think about taking a break for a little while. It is, I mean, I think about this in terms of, the media revolution that happened in the dawn of the internet, where we all became like, content creators. Sure. We basically just allowed all of the like workplace organization in every magazine structure and label and record label that existed, all of that to just get nuked. And now we're all like precarious freelancers that can never step off the treadmill. So we've kind of just, adjusted to lower wages and worse work environments. So yeah, it is a little bit more strenuous than it might have been working in a magazine in like, 1985, for example. But that's
you'd have
where
a
we are.
contract.
So yeah.
Yeah, you'd have a contract. But
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
also
Exactly.
there's this aspect of it that I find interesting, is what happens when your project that you're working on outside of the virality, right? Because that don't bank on that in 2025, ladies and gentlemen. But
yeah,
you got attention from a mainstream publication that did a feature on you. Oh no. Did you hear me?
yeah.
Okay.
It did not. If you're curious if it showed up as a bump in the analytics, for example, did it drive viewership? I would say that the relationship between big media audiences and legacy publications and whatever is happening on alt media is basically untethered right now. I think that these things are largely decoupled. My own view on the subject is that it's prestigious to have these profiles and things like that. Mostly what they serve for now is, well, one, I think obviously is vanity for certain creators, but two, they greenlight forms of investment in media entities where basically legacy media is functioning as the financial institution that is stamping the value of the investment or the loan that a investor is going to put into whatever kind of movie production is happening. So I don't think that getting big visibility in a legacy publication is a reliable way to get views on alternative media. And I would say that actually for the amount of the impact or the scale of alternative media as it exists now, these guys were basically not acknowledged by any of the legacy media structures up until like November of 2024. And now it's all people can talk about. But like, they had over a decade run of being quantitatively larger and more influential than these legacy forms. And then they were just dismissed and considered not influential. So we've made this total 180 where, podcasts were completely possible to ignore because they had no influence. And then on a dime, it's like, well, podcasts are the most influential form. And we've got to talk about young men who are listening to Joe Rogan and all of this stuff that we've heard basically uninterrupted for the last 12 months. Lo and behold, Zohran Mamdani just got these exit polls from, let me check my notes, the exact same demographic, young men 18 to 29, with a plus 40 margin. So I'm waiting for someone to explain what happened here. It's really curious.
I said that on you young people's social media. I said all the talk about Joe Rogan and Kamala Harris not going on Joe Rogan and podcasts make the campaign. I think he appeared on 31 podcasts during his campaign.
Wow.
Most of them way smaller than Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Right. And none of that really mattered because the campaign was about locality and real people getting together in real time. Mayor is also different than president. I guess we should also add that. That probably means something too.
Sure.
But it's I'm glad you mentioned the legacy media aspect of it and not being a huge bump to your viewership, because I do think that it does become an ego stroke for people to get that sort of legacy media attention. And there's also not a media team behind you. CAA isn't managing you that I know of. And
No, and I didn't know this before we started, but like basically, most of the people who are in this field who are not doing just kind of like, DIY audio podcasts, but are doing the video stuff, like they're all fucking, agented up and they've got representation and there are proper channels to go about and do this stuff. But I don't know, those things seem to be failing anyway. So why not take a shot at it?
And you don't do BetterHelp ads.
No, no. Well, I've tried to fight it. Did I tell you my theory about this? Okay,
No, I was
I have
fucking
a
with you about
theory.
that because I was like, oh, he's not
No,
reading
everybody
BetterHelp
does
ads.
it. They all
Yeah.
do. They all do these ad reads, and I have a theory that, like, particularly if you are a left-wing podcast, like,
Mhm.
this is a very expensive business, right? Like,
Mhm.
it costs you a ton of money. You've got people on set, you've got gear, you've got location rentals. There's like a lot more that goes into it than like you and me if we were sitting on a couch in our living room recording a
Yeah.
podcast. And so it's very tempting for people in the beginning to take on that ad read money. And once they've got you reliant on the ad read money, say that's like 50% of your income for the show. If you start to talk about politically sensitive subjects, all of a sudden, like, if the ad people divest, you can't talk about Israel, for example. There's
Oof.
all of these things that, like, once they know that you're dependent on these specific flows to
Mhm.
finance the show, they've got control of you on an editorial level. And so I mean, our people are working, like, I have heard through the grapevine that our entire operating budget is
Mhm.
less than the equipment budget for some of these comparable podcasts.
No
So,
shit.
yeah, yeah, seriously. Actually, I was kind of blown away because I thought I knew what other people were spending, and I realized I had no idea. I was off by like an order of magnitude plus.
Mm.
But the positive way of phrasing that is also that we're punching way above our weight class. There's a
Mhm.
good way of looking at this, but we're all working on, like, bargain bin, a fragment, a margin of what you would get in a comparable commercial situation. And so I am pretty determined, I have to say, to build up the thing until it is self-sustaining, so that no ad person, no brand or whatever can choose to, like, withdraw 25% of the overhead for the podcast because, some guest made some comment or I brought up a different topic. And having actual editorial control, I think, is a really valuable long-term investment. Yeah, and anybody I think who has worked in media, Crystal Ball talked about this. I think it was maybe on like a paywalled portion of the episode, but she
Mhm.
was saying that, like, there is a way in which, like, advertisers tend to exert their influence.
Mhm. No, and the fact that you've been able to not deal with advertisers has been fascinating to me, because it's so profitable
It is a
and
big part of
important.
the revenue model. Yeah, yeah, and we may have to do it eventually, but I'm pretty determined to not take any of that on until the show is actually self-sustaining at the most bare minimum level. Otherwise, we could just risk losing control of it in a few years entirely.
Sorry, that was my son calling. He's 7, and I'm sure he's watching something that isn't this and doesn't realize Daddy's on air. But I do want to talk to you about why originally you were here, which was your work
Oh yeah.
with memes.
Mhm.
Is the meme the new propaganda poster? What makes them so effective to you in shaping political understanding, especially amongst young people?
That's similar to the podcast question. When I started doing this stuff, I started publishing on this material in 2018. So I think a lot of people have just found out about what I've been doing for the past 6, 7 years in 2024. But yeah, I did quite a bit of work interviewing young people, talking about the unique media environment of today. And it was a real uphill battle. One, to get people to take memetics seriously as a
Mm.
type of political influence. Two, for people to believe how young the meme posters were, the people who were participating in these Discord communities on Instagram, 4chan, Twitter, like every platform basically has these people. And then yeah, to, like, just like podcasts, it all turns on a dime, and then now it's like, oh wow, we should have been paying attention to this. It was incredibly important, and we've seen, very unfortunately, really horrific acts of violence of people who have been internet poisoned for years at this point. So when I started publishing on this stuff, it is almost difficult to remember now how incredibly unpopular these things really were. Yeah, and it was hard to talk about them to the extent that I took my work to Patreon and Substack to publish independently, because it just wasn't the type of subject that, I mean, imagine, post 2016 and you're talking about we need to pay attention to what young white men post on the internet. That was not what people wanted to hear around that time. And they didn't want to hear that basically up until 2024. So yeah, it has been a pretty dramatic transformation. And the work that I published during that time, if people haven't come across it online, but they were, primary source interviews with people who were, I think, 12 to 22 roughly, in a handful of different projects, audio form, written. There's a ethnographic book, long form essay, but really, really in the weeds with kind of nitty gritty primary sources about people getting into radical politics through the internet, specifically through memes, but also through video content, through all types of online media.
And it's fascinating, the interviews, when you hear people, because you're putting also their financial situation, how it's changing, how their politics are changing, how they're being radicalized. It is a fascinating study. Do you think that a lot of the reason why you were being so ignored in the 2010s is because that just wasn't the discourse people wanted to hear at the time? This is a moment of BLM and Me Too and identity politics. And the identity politics that was probably the identity that no one wanted to talk about unless you were on Fox News was white people, right?
Right.
They're the villain in everybody's
Mhm.
identity story.
Yeah.
I'm actually writing about that as we speak, and how this is affecting people like Graham Plattner. But do you think that has something to do with why no one cared? Even though the people that you interview are kind of across ethnic and class lines. It wasn't like you were only talking to young white men. You're talking to kind of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is I talk to people in, this handful of different projects. So just to lay out like specifically what those were, there's a long form essay, a digital ethnography called Politogram in the Post Left in 2018. There's a follow-up publication called 20 Interviews, which is me talking to people on both the left and right. And then there's a podcast series called My Political Journey. And so all of these are kind of first person interviews with young people, Gen Z meme posters, largely speaking, but it's across the political spectrum. So there's people from the, all around the political compass, to reference the meme, but also, as compared to the US population, it was, I think, probably more diverse. And there's a way of thinking about these communities as being exclusively right-wing young men. But, I talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, actually. And I think what had been the predominant narrative in the media around that time was that sheerly by the influence of, having certain positions given a platform, is the phrase we used to use, by like allowing people to espouse certain ideas, that in and of itself was shifting people towards radical politics. And in the interview that you and I think first met and talked about with this young man named Zoomer, I was bringing in their class position, which in his case was dramatically shifting throughout the course of his political journey. And his politics don't necessarily make sense. They're not, especially coherent. But if he's coming from this kind of wealthy background to, being homeless, being living with a single mother, working in an Amazon factory, like just his material world transformed. And that was what moved his politics. And a lot of the stuff that you would hear on, let's say NPR, for example, was like more so looking into, this person is saying radical things, and generally people are too stupid to like make up their own mind. They're just being influenced by hearing it, right? It has nothing to do with declining material circumstances and neoliberalism and downward mobility of the generation and all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question previously, there's kind of two aspects of it, which was that, I came from a milieu in the art world where, the kind of generation, the peer group I was a part of, called post-internet, was pretty prominent for a few years. So that wave of interest was kind of cresting. I think people were less interested to write about that stuff. 2016 also made a lot of people very skeptical of the internet, whereas in 2011, you know, Occupy Wall Street, Arab Spring, like, baby, we're bringing democracy, we're toppling dictators. And then, you know, 5 years later, it's like, oh shit, this is fake news and fascism. And like anything where it was like talking about tech was relatively unpopular. And then especially if you were going to talk about young white men on the internet, and then also being a white man talking about that stuff, it's just a multiplier effect. And it was not, I think, the message that a lot of people wanted to hear in, you know, the academy and legacy legitimate institutions at that time specifically.
You should have pitched yourself as the white whisperer. And then maybe,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, like, you don't understand. I'm
All
them.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I come
Okay.
from their world of whiteness. We
Yeah.
have all been to an Abercrombie and Fitch. We enjoy camping.
I did, you know, I did hear from a researcher once that because there's people who like do this at think tanks, right? At universities, they do like studies, this ethnographic research type stuff, and that generally people would spend like 3 months embedded in a community, kind of like learn the codes and you know, the lingo, how people talk, what their symbols and their memes and their vernacular is, and that yeah, especially in the radical like white identity communities. It was only the white researchers that could withstand being in that environment because they personally didn't feel, I mean, you're looking at pretty extreme statements all the time that, you know, you might be the recipient of some of those remarks. So it was like, yeah, people would just like, they would not do the 3 months of research. They're like, I don't want to look at this shit every day. And so there is something about, I would also say that, you know, let's take, for example, one of the young people I interviewed who is, you know, he got into politics at age 13 through Gamergate, and he was into all of this radical right-wing stuff online. You know, I have very different politics, but he's going to listen to somebody who looks like me, you know, and so that in and of itself is actually at that specific stage of building a politics around identity and being very resistant to hearing any other counter messaging. It does actually have to kind of come from somebody who looks like you. And the same thing for people who were, you know, on the identitarian left. They didn't want to hear something from somebody who looked like me at that time. So in rare cases, you know, in those specific cases, I think it is actually necessary.
Do you see a connection between meme culture and Debord's society of the spectacle, where representation replaces real political engagement?
Where are you on Debord now? I feel like it was really essential to like arts education, but my kind of feeling about it right now is that it placed the war of semiotics and images kind of ahead of the material struggle. And so now I kind of feel like it was a really convenient text for people who work in media to feel like they were at the front of political contestation, and to kind of marginalize whatever was happening in the workplace or the shop or the factory floor.
I go back and forth because I shouldn't say recently, over the last year and a year plus, I had a friend and I, Professor Alexander Herbert, and I were writing this book about punk and politics, kind of expanding my extended essay into book length.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it today. And through him, he got me listening to PIL, Public Image Limited.
Okay.
And I even quoted him in an article that I wrote for Sublation. This is what you want. This is what you get. And I think John Lydon really saw the failure of the Pistols as kind of a failure of not going through with the spectacle. And then kind of to your point, that becomes his career through the 80s, at least the first half of it post Pistols, is the spectacle. It's going to be where I make these important political points, but it kind of falls on deaf ears, and everything he's trying to do, much like the Pistols, the opposite effect happens. Like it's tailor made for the nihilism of Gen X, and then it's and the MTV generation. So post the Kirk shooting, I think all bets are off for what we understand about young people, politics, and meme culture. Because there's a few crimes that have happened recently where people have been really silent. The killing of those 4 or 5 young people in Moscow, Idaho. The kid that shot Charlie Kirk, they've been pretty quiet. We don't know the motivations. So people project motivations onto him. It's real easy. The guy that shot Kirk's a groyper. The dude that shot or stabbed these young women is an incel. It's just easy peasy. It fits into a box.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy. It's way more complex.
You know, I came across, this is a few years ago now. I wish I remembered the name of the specific researcher. I believe his handle on Twitter is Anarcho-Sunni. It'll come back to me. He's a researcher who was presenting, and this is really, you know, in the weeds for people who are academics on this material, but something that he called at the time mixed ideology extremism. And he was looking at, his specialization is in, I believe, North Africa. And so he's looking at Islamic extremists on the internet and like ISIS recruitment videos and this type of material. And then he's also, you know, familiar, because these things cross-pollinate at some point, with versions of white identity extremism that exists online. And he was watching the collision and convergence of certain symbols where you would see, no exaggeration, this is a literal meme from the group that he was studying, Saddam Hussein with a swastika on his forehead. So they started to take symbols and build their own kind of symbolic memeplex, their own like cosmology, their own philosophy, basically blending, you know, Nazi extremist symbols with kind of jihadi memes. And there's a kind of weird thing that emerges as like Islam is the most trad world, and some nonsensical migration about who the original Aryans are, and a whole bunch of like bullshit. But basically they're trying to make up a narrative to substantiate the collision of aesthetics and symbols on the internet, and then they're cobbling together an ideology to fit the vibe. And so there's a lot of people who are now internet extremists, and their worldviews don't make fucking sense. They're not supposed to. And they're just taking a piece from this and a piece from that, and then they're putting together completely extreme ideas and, you know, going out and doing horrible things in the real world. That is just becoming more increasingly common. You know, so these were like fringe cases maybe a few years ago when people started looking into this, but now we're hearing about it like, you know, once a month in some cases. It's like, it is a very significant issue.
They all want to be, what's that kid's name? Elliot, the perfect gentleman. What did he call
Elliot
himself?
Rogers. Yeah.
Roger. Yeah. Everyone wants to be that, where they make all these videos, manifestos, if you will. It's like, what happens when no one has a manifesto and they just love the fact that you're spinning in a circle, trying to figure them out? Right. And that's how I feel about what
that
kind
is,
of violence we're seeing. It just,
I think
and that feels like punk rock to me. That really feels like punk rock to me. Like, I'm not a racist, but I'm wearing a swastika and a hammer and sickle, and I'm going to a dead Kennedy show because, you know, fuck you, mom. And you hate that everything comes down to fuck you, mom. Fuck you, mom.
I mean, the antisocial impulse of punk rock. I got a question for you, because I know you're a much more knowledgeable music historian, and I have a big blind spot in this field. But one of the things that's come up on the show in a variety of interviews is people getting politicized through music, specifically through punk rock, and often the Dead Kennedys. I heard, I think Brace told me this, but that like every single member of the Dead Kennedys is now a Republican. Is that true?
Not at all.
Okay.
No.
Is Jello Biafra A
Not at
Republican,
all.
a
Not at all.
Libertarian.
Probably
Really?
closer to that. Probably closer
Okay.
to that. No, those guys are not Trump fans.
Hmm.
Um, I'll tell you who one of the best rock and roll stories I heard, and I don't know how people look at this band as the surviving members have to be in their 70s. One of my friends from the warehouse that I lived in, his only job from a young man was working for the Grateful Dead when they were still doing the Ken Kesey acid test before they even were the Grateful Dead until Jerry
Whoa.
Garcia died.
Wow.
And he made cables, instrument cables for
Okay.
the Black Crows and just all these different bands. And he had this workshop, and you just listen to him tell stories. And he said, as Jerry was dying, he's like, leave these guys, are a bunch of Republicans. That's the only cat that I would say.
Wow. Yeah,
But the
yeah.
other guys, man, the most of those dudes from that scene that I personally know and have been around, I would not say they're Republican. I don't think they are as far left as people would like them to be.
Sure.
You can imagine that if you want to. I got bad news for you. But no, those guys are not Trump fans in the slightest. The surviving guys that are, DH passed away about a year ago, the drummer.
The
But no.
68 generation, though, that they had a pretty particular arc where, like, around the 90s, they're kind of in that California ideology of like Newt Gingrich politics, but then also Silicon Valley's happening at the same time. And
Yeah.
there's all this weird hippie influence.
The hippie stuff was interesting because you have, in the warehouse I lived in, you have people from the hippie generation. There'd be cats from the 70s. Like bands like Malo would come in there. You have Tower of Power guys coming in there. Who else from the 70s that you would know? I can't think off the top of my head. Then you had a lot of the 80s, from R&B to punk to metal guys coming in there. Definitely all the hip hop guys coming in there. And it is interesting listening to all these people talk, because when they're at the front desk with me, you're talking shop, which generally is like politics. And it is interesting to hear, people complain. I remember the Trump election. Nobody was happy. There was like a couple of guys there that were happy, but they weren't, well-known musicians. most of the guys that were very unhappy that he was elected. And they kind of got it. When your job is to play music, how politically active can you really be? Not everybody's going to be Tom Morello or Boots Riley. Some of the best conversations I ever had in that place were with Boots Riley. Those two people are probably anomalies. Everybody else pretty much sounds like something you hear on the news. And I don't think that's a bad thing per se. Music is their job. Writing songs is their job. Figuring out how you're going to live writing songs and playing music is your job. It's not necessarily trying to figure out how to seize the means of production.
Well, this is the irony, right? Is that a lot of people get politicized through music, but it's also not the job of cultural figures to like do pedagogy and like educate you about how to be a revolutionary, right? It's like they got to make good songs, right? Like there's a division of labor here. But it has been like really, really influential for a lot of people. Maybe it's different now with the internet. Maybe it's memes instead of, music
bands.
genres.
Yeah. What band is going to, I think it's your relation to power, right? Too. And I think young people are going to find the internet and podcasters more politically powerful than a song.
It feels like a punk rock thing too, because it's like unfiltered. You can do it, on your couch in your living room. You know, just like you could have a band in your garage. It's like
Mm.
kind of the 21st century version of
Right?
that, because no one
You
can
could
afford
just
to have
do it.
instruments now.
Yes. Who can where can you be loud? That's what I always say. There's these
That's true.
important
No,
places.
literally. Yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah.
played
Where
music
do you have a
too, and
soundproofed room?
you downplay your time playing music so much. And I think it's important to add that Josh also played music. And when you play music, it's important to talk about the places where you got kind of involved, if you will. Now, I am
Hmm.
from the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's some legendary places that exist in my hood. I'm from the East Bay too. So the Gilman, for example, is,
Right, right.
you know, in my hood, and all these other venues that I can name and you guys probably wouldn't know. But there's a lot going on at some of these shows where sometimes people are handing out, leaflets about
Yep.
PETA or,
Yep.
insert political thing here. A place like the
Hmm.
Gilman has certain rules you have to abide by before you can even play there. So I can see how the scene for some people can be a political awakening. I don't
Yeah.
know how that works anymore, because you kind of could just not know what the fuck was going on and just walk in there and be blown away by the thing. And I think that you're more inclined to do that on your laptop
Hmm. Hmm.
than you are to
Yeah.
physically leave the
Yeah.
house and go to an uncomfortable place where you might not be cool. You might not know anybody. Like, I don't know how much confidence younger people have to do those things. I recently had Aaron Gillespie from Under Oath on the show, and
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about with him, was kind of the early days of playing as well and having a spot to suck in.
Hmm.
That's how you get good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
part
Being
of
able to
doing
fail.
this, and that's the scary thing about podcasting as well. I had 30 some episodes where no one saw my face, and I felt very confident about that. And I'm trying to figure it out. And I got to figure it out. I'm still figuring it out. I did music for Jesus. I think I started my first group thing when I was like 14. So I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
decades to figure out how to act in front of people. Um, so even doing this, I've had practice.
Right.
Where does one get that kind of practice where you don't have the forever thing around you? No one saw me when
Yeah.
I threw up right before the first show I ever did in high school.
Right. Right.
So where can you go learn how to suck, go suck, figure it out? Maybe you get good, maybe you quit. But there's a place that welcomes that. I don't know where that place is anymore for a young person. And those places to me are extremely important, not for just music scenes. They're politically important. They're important for your community. I got to play music all over weird places in the world, and I was never famous. So I was always somewhere really small.
Hmm.
And these small places would be the most awesome shows, the greatest communities, the support, right? That to me is where you can build shit. Where is that for anyone right now? People think so big and globally. Can they even think? Again, going back to Mondami, he could go on, some of these bigger podcasts, but it doesn't help when you just need to talk to New Yorkers.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I don't know if we've brought this up on the show before, but I run this arts nonprofit, which is a largely an online magazine. But we've done, physical exhibitions, we've done film screenings, we've done book launches, a variety of other programming. It's mostly based in New York, but in large part, it's just run online, where there's like a Discord, there's a Substack, there's an Instagram, and so I get to see you know, every year, several hundred submissions from like young people who are trying to make their way in the world. And, you know, it's not music, it's art, it's film, it's writing. But I have noticed a really clear trajectory where when I came to New York, the cost of living was much lower, and you could like live with a bunch of roommates, but also split another space with people in which you could get up to like dirty studio fabrication. Like you could do spray paint, you could like use epoxy and like shit that you can't do at the house or you're going to poison yourself, right? You need like a dirty workplace to do that. You're not going to have a chop saw next to your end table, your night table where you sleep. And over the, you know, let's say, I mean, I've been in New York now for longer than I haven't, but like I've seen a very clear gradation that because of the cost of living, people do not have a place to literally make physical things. And so all the work that we get, or not all of it, but like most of it, is stuff that people can make on a laptop because they just don't have the capacity or they can't afford to like take risks anywhere else. So yeah, I mean, it is again that question of aesthetic stagnation. It's like that's why things look really redundant, and art isn't, you know, as weird and vibrant and explosive as the way it was, and you know, maybe like 15 years ago, for example, because people just can't afford to take the same risks. You know, it's really difficult. And Amber brought up a great point, specifically in reference to music, is that the venues that used to host, you know, kind of like young, cutting edge, not the biggest act, but like places where people would cut their teeth. A lot of that stuff just got squeezed out by real estate and private equity. And so it's like, you're doing what? SoundCloud, like bedroom music is your kind of only shot to be able to make stuff now,
And that's
because
all,
there's no small venues.
there's no small venues. There's no places where you can make noise. There was a place that is famous for a deadly fire in Oakland, California, called the Ghost Ship. And a well-known man that works as a homeless advocate. He runs Tenderloin Housing, I believe. Randy Shaw wrote a book called Priced Out after this fire. Because what fascinated Randy about the whole thing, and Randy's been in the Bay Area for years, he's come on the show a few times, was that people couldn't afford to live in artist spaces anymore. And so this guy had this really ramshackle warehouse in Oakland, where there's still industrial space. I lived pretty much in this industrial space. When I say the warehouse, I don't ever want anyone thinking I lived in some sort of like cool loft. Like I was squatting in a warehouse, like all the other homeless people that were squatting in their cars across the street.
Right.
But it was a place where people made music and recorded music. But the point is, this Ghost Ship was an artist collective, but like most artist collectives, you are living on the fringes of society, like you're saying. Yeah. Because you have to find somewhere cheap to live, and you're probably making art that isn't for mass consumption. This is not Thomas Kincaid paintings.
Yeah.
Right? You're making weird shit. You're doing weird shit. You're making weird music. You're doing weird drugs. You're doing all the things that you think happen in a massive space that is unregulated with artists.
Yeah.
You're violating every security code known to man on a daily basis. And every day you're alive, you probably should thank someone's God, but you don't trip. That place burned down in a fire during a big show.
Yeah.
They would throw these big parties and hundreds of people would come there, and the whole thing it was a cinder block, and it burned down, and the city was upset about it. And being the quote unquote liberal Mecca that one would think Oakland, California is, they had a big meeting where they said, well, all these artist warehouse spaces, why don't you come we'll have a big meeting about, because we want to shut these places down. And all these stupid people came out and said, I live at 444 blah blah blah. It's just like, Jesus.
Oh God.
Right?
Yep.
Shutting shit down left and right.
Yeah.
And you know, if you are of a certain age, maybe these things go on now. I don't know. I also live in a different country. There were great shows that dudes threw in their warehouse. There was a rap group that still exists to this day. They're called the Living Legends, from the Bay Area, and they lived in a warehouse in East Oakland, and they would throw these parties to kind of pay their rent. And then they decided not to pay
Yep.
their rent for a few months and threw these parties and saved their money and toured Europe.
Oh, wow. Okay. They got away with it too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Nice.
And they've been doing music for 30 some years, man. They're still
Yeah.
doing it. So God bless them.
You know, the one thing I would throw in here is that, you know, I've done my fair share of like scrappy DIY, you know, art shit with, we definitely should have had ventilation for some of the chemicals that we were spraying and all this stuff. And it is kind of, you know, there's a risk of like romanticizing it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have in my, you know, previous career of like making and exhibiting art and like working, you know, doing art shows, going to museum projects, like this shit is very different in Europe. Like that is equally the advanced world. It is a very well capitalized first world country, but the people who do DIY shit there do it a lot more comfortably with healthcare and like
Yeah.
their shit isn't burning down. You know, they got proper regulations about it. But like I think the, you know, the thing that I really have learned being in media, being in art, and like in some cases elite sectors of society, right? I've met some very wealthy people in you know, different lines of work, but like it is impossible to put a price on a life well lived.
Ooh.
And being part of an art scene, being part of a literary scene, being part of a music scene, like the stories and the memories that I have are so meaningful to me. But just clearly, by having met a lot of wealthy people, they are spending tons and tons of money trying to get that experience, and they can't fucking buy it.
No.
And so putting a price on a life well lived is, I think, an impossible thing to do. And so like the meaningful experiences, like part of being a society, being a member of a group and a member of a community, that is like the texture of life, you know, like you can't buy that. And that is the thing that gets squeezed out when everything gets, as exactly as you said, priced out, right? Like as the cost of living goes up, like that kind of meaningful being rooted or tied to a place, recognizing the venue, you know,
Yeah.
recognizing the place where people used to hang out. All of this shit is now turned over. And it's like everyone is, you know, totally atomized. We don't even recognize, we just have like someone else with a similar algorithm now, someone else with a similar Spotify, but we're not going to like the venue that normally we would see bands come up with. Do you remember what it felt like to see a young artist who like you saw their
Oh,
early show and they totally
oh,
flopped and it sucked, and then they went on to get like super famous and successful, and like the amount of pride that you felt in your
yes.
community with the people who had like co-invested their creative labor and like, you know, workshop stuff together, and you just see someone's craft improved. It's like, I mean, I have that now with like people in Do Not Research, where you know, there's a young man, Leo, who just posted his work literally earlier this evening before we got on the stream, and I saw his stuff like 4 years ago, and it is just the most like meaningful experience to see year after year this guy continues hacking away at the shit, and his work is so fucking good now. You know, like that is really cool. That is really cool, and that's you know, you can't buy something like that. So yeah, it really is a shame that those
Oof.
possibilities are disappearing.
Because also too, it feels like I was talking about this with a friend. Your comparison to what was success was whoever was close to you.
Yes.
If there was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
artist in your milieu that maybe did a bigger show than you, even if
Yep,
it's on a
yep.
DIY level, you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, 40 people came out to John's show, dude. How
Exactly.
did we get
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
John's level? How did we
Yep.
get to John?
Mhm.
That was the thing, right?
Yeah.
You had this immediacy, and you weren't comparing yourself with the biggest artist in the world, because that's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Why would you? Your friends are going to do that when you say you're an artist, but fuck them. And living here, and I've said this, and I'll say it again because there's probably some new viewership because you're on the show. I live in Mexico, and I was walking in downtown Tijuana, and I heard music that wasn't the typical music you hear in a tourist place, which is like fucking reggaeton, an ass full of reggaeton. And it was like metal. And I was like, where the fuck is this coming from? And these kids are throwing a show in an alley, Josh. It's just an alley.
Wow.
They built a little skate ramp. So they're skating, they're moshing, the parents are there, the grandparents are there.
Wow.
Everybody's chilling. Wow. The biggest thing, the cops aren't fucking with anybody.
I was just gonna say, yeah, if you tried to do that in New York, someone would come 5 minutes into the set, shut the whole thing down.
Shut you down. So what happens when you can have that kind of fun? As a parent, I'm a parent. I know where my kid is. I know where my kid is.
Yeah.
Is he probably having his first sip of alcohol? Is he probably smoking a joint? Maybe. I don't know. But I know where he is and I can find him. They're not fighting. They're just trying to have fun. That's magic.
Mm.
There's kids learning graffiti. There's kids learning how to skate. Like we said with music, there's kids trying to figure it out. There's a little bit of adult supervision to make sure that shit doesn't go totally off the rails and you don't get a fire.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
But overall, mostly it's kids doing this stuff because I live in an environment where there's just a lot of empty spaces.
Yep.
And people take advantage of these empty spaces and they throw parties. And for the most part, government doesn't give a shit. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I'm part of a reading group here in New York, and several of the participants are artists that are like, 10 plus years older than me, but a lot of them, they came up running like DIY venues. And yeah, it was just really clear that like, I had not seen this personally, but I've heard stories from them that like around these punk subcultures, because we were talking about getting introduced to politics through these kind of local scenes. There's like a skinhead situation in which there are people who dress similarly, but have very different politics. So as someone who grew up in the suburbs, that sounds really fucking whack. But apparently this is like a big deal. And it happens like kind of a lot to people who are 10 years older than me and ran DIY punk venues. And so, I think I'm trying to put myself in that situation where like, imagine you're a young person going to a show, you're going to this like cultural experience, and there's people who like look cool. They've got a sense of fashion. They're familiar with like different genres of music. You want to have some kind of identity. You're kind of looking to learn from these people and maybe find the right crew that's good for you. What's your cultural identity in this case? The version of that now on the internet is like, it is so easy to just click into a whole bunch of fringe radical shit and explore it. Whereas in person, you would have to, muster the courage to go up to this person who is like wearing all of the codes of this subculture and like try and impress them with some kind of knowledge about a book or a movie that you probably haven't seen, So there was a lot more friction and resistance. And so now like the kind of subcultural identities that people get into is like they become some fucking, Discord extremist. They become literally a national syndicalist. This was one of the people I interviewed on the old podcast. It's like, who is a national syndicalist in like 2019 or whenever that podcast
can we save them from this though, Josh? Or is this just the new way of things?
There's something weird about the architecture, and maybe this links back into the kind of libertarian designs of the internet and the political compass and all that stuff. But like, what, just abstractly, conceptually, what is the purpose of having a set of politics so niche that there's no one else in your political coalition, right? To be completely individualized in like your specific stance of, anarcho-transhumanist with queer characteristics or, whatever long tail ideology. That I think is a weird personal branding development of the kind of Web 2 attention economy. And I just see that as basically being, you know, it was technologically determined. These tools work in certain ways. And then the attention economy has basically created this incredibly atomized, individualized subculture, which has, kind of subsumed. And I know we've gone back and back and forth about this before, but I think like that kind of atomized individual political identity has kind of subsumed what used to be cultural affiliations of genre like punk, metal, ska, so on and so forth.
Agreed. No, that
And mostly for worse,
I do feel that way, that it's kind of gone for worse. And part of me goes, well, if you just close your computer and go for a walk, and then no one knows what the fuck you're talking about. But I also live in a community where everyone's 65 and up, so
Yeah.
they're just not online in the same fashion as a lot of younger people are. And the internet doesn't seem to be as prevalent here. I mean, of course, it's a thing. Of course, people have social media. Of course, people are texting and all the other things that people do, watching YouTube videos. But as far as like just going out on a random night and seeing tons of young people just out doing crazy shit, I feel like I see that a lot more here. Maybe because people live so multi-generationally, that to have that kind of alone space where you can just zoom out and just dick around on your device for hours on end and be left to your own quote unquote devices is a little harder to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's an interesting political climate that we're in, and the focus on youth and which way they're going to go is even more interesting. I was watching, to write this thing, I talk about Barack Obama being kind of the end to a certain point of the low culture of the late 90s and early 2000s. And I rewatched his 2004 speech. And it's so interesting to hear a speech where someone doesn't say right and left, because that's not how anyone was thinking in 2004.
Oh,
because
yeah,
the Fox
right.
documentary hadn't came out yet. The Fox documentary, to me, I don't know how you feel about this, where it comes out that Fox is pushing these right-wing talking points, was for a lot of people this light bulb on moment that news is extremely partisan, because most of us grew up watching local news. So news was traffic, this person got shot, public interest story, sports, and weather.
Right.
Cable news said, fuck your weather. And news is going to be dramatic stories. And I don't know if you had him on the show yet, or if you have him on the queue or not. Maybe he's not somebody you want to talk to. A guy named Ross Bennis wrote this really good book, 1999, the year low culture captured the world, or something like that. And it talks about, the rise of Trump and pro wrestling and Jerry Springer and Woodstock 99, Insane Clown Posse, just all the Beanie Babies. And it's a very interesting book, because I think we forget about that moment, even though, because you're born in the 90s, but still, about pro wrestling.
I'm 87. My brothers,
so yes,
my
you were
brothers,
totally alive for the Monday night battles and how that changed. Donald Trump runs for office for the first time in 1999. And do you know who he says he wants to be his vice president?
Who was that back then?
Oprah Winfrey.
You're shitting me. Come on.
So
that's great.
when we think about these left-right divides, that's just not how we thought, because we're still trying to figure out what this cable news is. And there's this interesting thing that Ross says in the book about the rise of some of these shows has a lot to do with mergers and acquisitions and financial deregulation.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
ability for networks to syndicate their own programming, and they found it was
Yeah.
way cheaper to make quote unquote reality television. Warner, the Time Warner merger is like one of the biggest in history, and he kind of puts it together, which I thought was really fascinating. He's like, Jenny Jones, who you probably don't know, and that's fine. But for those that don't know, there was a woman that had a daytime talk show. Her name was Jenny Jones. She was a comedian, and her show was famous for, she had a show where it was called Secret Crushes, right? So there's always an 800 number you called. So if you have a secret crush, call. So this lady calls and she goes, my friend is gay and he likes my other friend that's a man. And we want to bring the guy on who doesn't know that my friend is gay. So they told the straight man that someone has a crush on you. So he knew someone had a crush on him, and he knew that two people in his hometown were coming. It was his homegirl and his homegirl's friend, and he knew the homegirl's friend was gay. He knew these people. It wasn't a big deal. He goes on air. They drop the bomb that it's the gay guy that likes him. He's shocked, a little embarrassed. Goes home. There's some teasing. There's some razzing. He gets a little upset about it. And shoots the guy. He kills the man.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Now, Warner owns Jenny Jones. They also own this new channel that's going to cover the case called Court TV.
Wow.
They also own CNN that's going to cover the news story.
Yep.
And this is going to be one of the biggest stories of the year that happened. And we don't understand that there's a monopoly behind the scenes making sure that they're just, hey, we can run this story because we're just printing money by controlling what news people, what becomes news to people.
Right. I have a political proposal to put on the table. That's
Let's do it.
We suspend habeas corpus for anyone who owns a media company that has a reach of over 1 million people, right? Like that is just so criminally, socially, ethically, morally repulsive and literally criminal that these people should be punished and held accountable for it. That's so immensely dark.
Well, the Jenny Jones show got sued and there was a settlement. But as far as, Warner, it became that's how these things work.
Yeah. I mean, what monetary compensation can you give for somebody who died? It's like you can't reverse that. Like,
Thank you. No, there is no compensation. To me, it was a fascinating little tidbit of history of a time that I think we look at where we are today and it almost feels like we think we got here magically. And it's like, no, these seeds have been planted for a long time. And in writing this piece and kind of going back to the 90s and remembering the excitement that was in the air when Bill Clinton was coming into office, because we were going to shake things up and be done with this conservative rule. Right?
Yeah, we shook up the welfare state. Yeah.
That's right.
Like, come on.
But what he appealed to young voters. He went on Arsenio Hall.
Yeah.
He was all over MTV. He was younger than George Bush Sr. This was a youth movement for a lot of people. He wasn't part of the silent generation. This is a baby boomer. And after 8 years of Clinton, and he ends in scandal, you get George Bush because he's an everyman. And the everyman has been marketed to you through the 90s through people like Donald Trump, through these things like reality television, through people like Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer, for those that don't know, if you kind of know his story, you know that he was the mayor of Cincinnati and he got embroiled in a sex scandal. That's not exactly how it worked. He was a city council member that wrote checks to a brothel and got caught in a sting that a city council member wrote checks to a brothel. He admitted he leaned into it, then ran for mayor and won.
Wow.
Served for mayor, became a news guy, becomes Jerry Springer, the TV guy. The rest is history. Who does that sound familiar to? Donald Trump leans into his mistakes.
Yeah, very successful media brand. Yeah.
And we again, Bill Clinton is the polished, smart politician, but he's a slick politician. Like all politicians, we need an everyman. So for some reason, this guy that was born into immense wealth is an everyman that was relatable. In 2004, Bush Jr. won a poll that said he was the most he was the guy you wanted to have a barbecue with.
Yeah, right. I remember. Yeah.
Like what?
Right. Yeah. The guy
But then
who
you get tired
killed
of
a million people in Iraq. That's you really want to have a beer with that
you want to
guy.
have a barbecue with him.
Yep.
And then you have to ask yourself, why don't we talk more about the fact that these big protests were happening in the 90s and 2000s? If I say 1999, what was the biggest thing that happened in 99? Most people are going to maybe say Woodstock.
WTO.
You might say
Is that what you're
WTO.
thinking?
Most people are going to say
Yeah, yeah.
Woodstock.
I have a friend who's making a doc about it actually right now, and I think it's especially seeing how Trump just like rearranged the whole like global model, right? We're no longer in Bretton Woods neoliberalism anymore. But if you went back to the WTO and you told people, yeah, globalization is going to end, you're never going to guess how. Like that would be fucking crazy, right?
That
You
is
go
your
back
friend
to some
Alex?
anarchist protester.
Are you friends with Alex
I don't.
Lugaro?
I'm not sure the name. No, I'm not sure the name of the filmmaker. My friend Rial, who's a producer for the show, is part of this film. I've only ever seen the trailer for it so far.
Oh, okay, because
it looks really fantastic.
That did a documentary on WTO 99, and it's just all footage.
We might be talking about the same guy.
You might be talking about the same people.
Yeah.
He's probably part of the same crew of people that did it. And that was funny enough. That was the Tuesday show. So I've got an ass load of like 99 stuff just stuck in my head and going back to that time. And part of the thing I'm writing, and sorry to go on this tangent, is that when we think of these protests, we forget how like identity based some of them were. Go back and look at the footage of 99. That was a white protest.
Oh yeah. Pacific Northwest is like, yeah, it's there's a very specific flavor up there.
2003 anti-war protests as well. These were kind of indicative to me of where we're going to be with the way we see a certain left-right divide. We don't have it at that time, but if you look at kind of back to the 99 low culture moment, people looked at cats that went to Woodstock 99. I don't know if you remember some of the news interviews that came after that. And that's where you start having people talk about rape culture.
It was, I mean, from what I remember, because I was young at this time, but like people couldn't get water, they couldn't get toilets, there's violence, there's sexual assault. Like it was not the kind of hippy dippy free love everybody gets along environment that you imagine from like the original Woodstock. This was like basically anarchy and warlords in 99.
But you know what else was somewhat similar? And the big difference, 69. Can't get water.
Was it really?
There was a bathroom for over 300,000 people.
Wow.
The difference in 69, 94, and 99. In 69, when they breach the fences, they say, let them in for free or we're going to have a problem on our hands.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference. In 94, the same thing happens. People breach the gate. Fuck it, let them in. They lost tons of money, but it is the replaying, it's the selling of the image, the IP, which enables them to make their money back. 99 is the year they go, we figured out how to fence these fuckers in.
Right.
And that's when there were rapes in 69. Documented. But it's a different story because it's part of this narrative of the greatest generation ever that ended wars and had better racial relations and enabled women to be part of a sexual revolution and control their own bodies. That's the narrative that they get to control with Woodstock. 99 will forever be, give me something to break.
Go ahead. Okay, I'm going to ask a question, but I probably already know the answer to this. Did you ever see a documentary by Steve Bannon called Generation Zero?
No.
Okay. I was thinking I'm going to ask this, and it's like probably I shouldn't even.
No,
No one's seen it. Okay.
please give me a little
So
backstory on this, bro.
I
Hale.
happen to be I'm very familiar with the Steve Bannon cinematic oeuvre. I have a DVD copy of Fire from the Heartland, Awakening of the Conservative Woman. I've seen a lot of his films, but in Generation Zero specifically, it is like a deranged, bizarro universe of Adam Curtis. And his version of the 68, and he's playing kind of clips from Woodstock, right? But he's talking
Mhm.
about the baby boomer kind of hippie generation. And he says like they carried on cultural progressivism, but they were materially the most um, the most privileged people to exist in the history of the world up until that point. And so I
Oof.
feel like we're kind of at this point now where, like, I would say Bannon's politics are more so now hegemonic because the administration is on his side of this issue. And that might be more dominant now than the kind of version that I think you and I grew up with, that, this kind of like lefty back to the land, or like pseudo lefty back to the
Yeah.
land, California commune thing was going to save the world. I think now people kind of look at that generation as being incredibly fortunate, really great wages, and kind of being like, yeah, maybe not like politically fastidious enough that they didn't hold back neoliberalism, right? And like I have to imagine that a lot of the people who were part of that generation ended up voting for Reagan in 80 and 84, right? He carries
Oof.
like 48 states. And it's
Yeah.
like, where's the hippie commune now, So there's a little bit of a narrative transformation there.
There's a lot. There's people that say the new left brings in neoliberalism, and I get what they're saying with some of the thinkers, right? But there's a lot of things at play that I think we forget when we remember that era. So yeah, there's some people that have better wages. It's also a violent time. We forget about how violent the 60s and
Yeah,
70s were.
yeah, right.
Um, but it's also a time where you can commit some pretty heinous acts and fall into a union job. Not everybody, but some people can fall into a union job. You can be
Yeah,
mildly illiterate and find a job that pays decent wages, retire from it, buy a house,
yep.
and have a family. You can also beat the shit
Pension,
out of your
yep.
wife, um, do
Very
crazy
true,
shit
yeah.
with your kids. There's a lot of things you can do in that era. So we have to look at it, and it's hard, I think, for people to look at it historically because it'll fuck up your theory that you're trying to put together so you can get published. But I always look at, like, recently the anniversary of 1979 in Greensboro just passed. And
Mm,
whenever I think of the new left, I think of these people in general, because here you have the epitome of what Bannon's talking about. These prominent figures that had the ability to go to school, prosper, literally become doctors, have practices, but be so ideologically committed to the cause. You put your practice on hold and you go get a job on the shop floor in a textile mill in
right, right.
Greensboro, North Carolina,
Yep,
to
yep.
organize. And you are seeing the downfall of things like the Klan because they don't have a certain amount of organization or political power. And, ironically, it's through a government snitch that horrible thing happens, where sadly the Klan meets up with neo-Nazis, which were people that they didn't really dig, to kill these quote unquote communists that they felt like they had to kill because they killed communists in Vietnam. But I don't know if there's a left that is today that is that ideologically committed to leave successful professional practices like being fucking doctors to go
To go get
unionize.
a shop floor job. Yeah.
Yeah, not to work in labor aristocracy, but to go work on the shop floor. And you are seeing kind of the end of the Klan. And these are people that grew up where that's the big bad. These people saw, even though they didn't grow up in it, because most of these people were white from the East Coast, they still understood the history of Jim Crow. They understood the history of lynching. And you can say it's over, even though they were advised not to do it. I understand why they wanted to do it. And I don't think people like that are a part of the hippie to yuppie turn. I don't think people like that are part of the new left.
Not those guys.
Brought in neoliberalism. But I also understand why those people retreated to academia. I understand why those people went to go work for politicians. There's a handful that stayed. But when you've seen that level of, I don't even want to say corruption, but that level of violence and police cooperation to a certain level with said violence, maybe you don't want to keep going because you've seen the end. And then there's the, people want to talk about, what's that movie, One Battle After Another, where
the Paul Thomas Anderson, the new
Paul
one?
Thomas Anderson movie. It's like, what do people think happened to these quote unquote revolutionaries? When the funding gets cut off, what do you know how to do? Maybe rob a bank, maybe. Like, seriously, what do you know how to do? Be a professional revolutionary? What the fuck is that?
Well, yeah, a lot of people don't have, they don't have a marketable skill in many cases. Yeah, I mean, I think that if we're getting more granular with the history of the New Left, there's really important book by Fred Turner. I know you're familiar with it, but for people on the stream who maybe haven't come across it, it's called From Counterculture to Cyberculture. And so it kind of like, gives the history of that arc that I had mentioned before. But Turner himself, as a historian of this subject, he draws a distinction between the New Left and what he calls the New Communalists. And so the people that went out to the communes of the 60s and 70s that were, not part of they weren't Marxists. They were like some kind of weird New Age thing, but their politics turns into, it's organized in large part by this catalog that goes out called the Whole Earth Catalog, which has a bunch of kind of living off of the land stuff, but then also very early kind of like tech media theory, and in some cases like gadgets and programming guides. The Whole Earth Catalog has a pretty clear trajectory into the Silicon Valley stuff. And now Stuart Brand, the publisher of that Whole Earth Catalog, runs something called the Long Now Foundation, which is has actually given a platform to a whole spectrum of people with different philosophical, political viewpoints, but is, in large part kind of like dedicated to that entrepreneurial kind of American startup mentality and individuals with good ideas saving the world. So there's a very kind of clear distinction that emerges in the late 60s, early 70s between this new communalist strand in California and like the SDS and everything else that came from that. And I mean, I should say I'm like still I'm very much an admirer of the work of like Michael Harrington, for example. So I have in some cases fond memories of these things, but if you go through it with a fine-tooth comb, there are many different varieties. Anyone from any movement can go off in a whole slew of different directions given like 30, 40 years. So
because you have to ask yourself, like, what skill, if they went to college, they could teach. If they didn't finish
academics,
what can you really do if you might understand weapons? Maybe you have some ex-military people in your crew that understand planning. Maybe you have people that are very comfortable taking hostages and killing people. Maybe you rob drug dealers. That is not sustainable. You know what I mean?
Right.
For your revolution.
And you're entering the workforce at like age 35 or something like that. And you're probably competing for jobs against like 18-year-olds, for example.
And where were you the last 10 years? Oh, in a revolutionary commune.
Would you explain the gap in your resume?
You might know me from my previous works. I kidnapped
Yeah.
Patty Hearst. You might remember me from that.
Right.
I was
Yeah, hard
black
to
activist number
sell
4.
that to your employer, right?
What do you? We have to kind of be honest about what transferable skills might one have, and if we fast forward kind of back to the 90s and the 2000s, there is an uptick in Black entrepreneurship through financial deregulation, the ability
Mm,
to leave the inner city. If you did buy your house for $30,000 in 1991 at 18% interest, by 2001 it's worth $300,000 in that same neighborhood, and your
mm,
interest rate might be lower, so you can sell it and leave. You can finally start a business with the profit that you got, maybe fixing houses if you're handy. You don't need a license for that.
mm.
I went to look it up, and the amount of business licenses from Black people, it like quadrupled between 2000 and 2007. A lot of that has to do with market
Wow.
deregulation.
Wow.
So people will remember the end of Clinton and George Bush as financial good times,
Wow. Yeah. Interesting.
and they won't understand that it was built on a bubble. They just want the good times back.
Right. Right.
And then that's what you get in spades with Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you definitely get it after George Floyd.
Hmm.
Reparations will take the place of $50 billion in startup funds and grants for your projects.
Hmm.
And then and you people get to say the N-word in front of white people. It's fine. They can't say that. It's part of your reparations payout package. But in all in all in all seriousness, you understand why a guy like Trump, the doors left open. We forget how hated he was after 2020. Even his own party, his kids were distancing themselves from him. I still haven't
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
his funky ass daughter. I've heard Jared Kushner's name a bunch of times. Where the hell does his daughter go?
Right. Right. Yeah. She's oddly absent. She was on Lex Friedman.
Oh, was she?
Uh, yeah, I mean, this is maybe a few years ago now, but I think that's the last big media appearance that I saw, and it was definitely before he did the show, which would have been in 2024. So maybe we're talking about 22, but she's been kind of
Yeah.
out of the media for like 3 years or something like that. I'd have
Distance
to check the
themselves.
dates.
He was bad. He was a pariah. But the door gets left open because the avenue to your liberation is going to be through entrepreneurial ingenuity. Here's a bunch of
Yeah.
money for your
Yeah.
projects. And look at all the things that we got, right? So Netflix had the black section. Oscars so white, and you get a bunch of blackety black movies. And that was all we needed, right? We needed cultural representation. Once we see ourselves on screen, then we can get there. Then we saw ourselves on screen. But the problem is we don't have enough black people in the writer's room. Then you get black people in the writer's room. But the problem is we don't have enough studio heads that are black. Never is the problem. The problem is maybe we should change residential zoning laws now.
Hmm.
No, that's never it. That's never it. Mm-mm.
I mean, I feel like for most of, we've been talking about this period of the 90s to the 2000s, like, before the financial crisis. And there kind of, wasn't really much, uh, there weren't many pathways to liberation other than becoming an entrepreneur at that time, because, industry is being offshored, wages are stagnant, upward mobility is declining. And so it's clear that you build like an incentive system for Americans to, in some cases, just reasonably think that their pathway to, the safe middle class life is through becoming a bootstrapping entrepreneur, because that's the only way to do it, right? But then the problem is, if you start to slice the numbers, there was a a lot of record-breaking votes for Trump in 2024 because, lo and behold, representational diversity at the top doesn't satisfy most people because they are, surprise, surprise, not at the top. And so yeah, it's like, unless you're giving out some kind of material improvement to the vast majority of people, like, you're just gonna start to lose them, unfortunately.
Who
Yeah, I
got
mean,
mad?
I'm sympathetic to who. What's that?
No, I said who got mad? Sorry to cut you off. I was like, but who got mad when affirmative action ends? Right, the Harvard verdict comes down.
Hmm.
My good friend Bert Cooper wrote a great piece. It's either in the Times or the Atlantic. I can't remember. Where it's basically like there's millions of black people that had no idea about the verdict, and it's not because they're stupid. It's because it never affected them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, how
Harvard was
much of the
already
country
recruiting
goes to
from
Harvard?
Africa. Yeah, right. They were those Ivy League schools were getting their people from overseas. They weren't
Hmm.
mining in the inner city.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, I mean, the
who does
amount
the
of our
diversity work
discourse that
for?
we spend on, like, basically debating, ultra elite politics is like, there's almost no room for anything else in American discourse. I mean, the media concentration on what's going on at Harvard, as if there's like a substantial part of the American population that goes there, is it's wild. I mean, I think that elite ideology is in some cases very important, but the idea that that thing has a kind of direct inroads to election results, for example, is, I think, sorely, sorely mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. Um, are you allowed to say who your next guest is on Doom Scroll?
I can, because we're gonna put it out so very soon. We just talked to Felix Biederman from Chapo
Oh,
Trap
no
House
shit.
today. So that was earlier this afternoon, and we're gonna try and rush it out to get it, hopefully for Monday, Tuesday next week. But we're gonna be crunching through the weekend. It was good. We did like a recap of the Zoran election. We talked about a number of stuff, big picture, neoliberalism,
Mhm.
and then yeah, we go into a little bit, I think, on the paywall episode about the Gravel Institute, where I'm
Ah,
not sure if you saw this, because, I follow a lot of like Zoomer politics and,
yeah.
edgy posters on the internet. But the Gravel teens, I believe now both of them are working for A16Z, Mark Andreessen's venture capital company.
I
So
didn't know
there's
that.
a new kind of Bernie to New Right pipeline that has emerged in the last few weeks. It's
Whoa.
a very interesting kind of development. So we speculate about some of the stuff we've been talking about here, even of these long arcs of people moving from left to right and vice versa, and how politics transform over the course of several years.
That's interesting. I remember asking early on, I had some Starbucks people on the show. I can't remember where. I think they were in Atlanta. And there was a young kid, like young. He was getting ready to go to school. And I was like, are you still going to be part of the union when you get your tech job and you move into a nice
Mm.
apartment downtown? And the kid goes, ooh. And I wasn't trying to be, I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of asking it with my tongue in my
At
cheek.
least he's being honest, right?
There was that just like, wow. Um, People are so excited about this, but let these people finish school and see if they feel the same way about the world.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, and all of the we're living in the kind of proof of this right now, which, at the top of the show I mentioned the enormous margins of young men voting for Zoran, but like the idea that most people have any coherent sense of politics or a rigorous commitment to a set of policies, I think most people are kind of going on vibes, to be honest. And vibes right now is like, whoever the anti-establishment insurgent candidate is that promises to change something from the uninterrupted decline of neoliberalism, which has been the case for like my entire adult life, right, for like the past over 40 years. Anybody who counter signals that, who counter signals what Israel is doing in Gaza, who shows people that they are meaningfully going to change the current status quo from the right or left, that's going to win over an enormous number of people, right? So what I like to think of as a kind of challenge to your belief system and some of your comfortable political assumptions is that there must be a non-insignificant number of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 and then a few days ago voted for Zohran Mamdani, right?
I believe
Like
that.
statistically, that has to
I
exist.
believe that. Oh, I totally believe that.
And that is
I
the average
totally.
Doom Scroll viewer. So those are the people that we want to be watching the show because they're open
I'm
to
jealous.
new
Look,
narratives.
man. Look, I'm gonna say something that I probably shouldn't say on air. Oh fuck it, I say a bunch of dumb shit on air that I regret later. The worst thing to happen if you do this for a living is you say something that is to the chagrin of your viewing audience and they unsubscribe. Some their page, like you're done. And I've always been somewhat jealous of people that have a certain following like your own, where the numbers aren't really slipping and you can have kind of anybody on that you want on, because you've had some figures that I think some people would think are controversial. What is that show that some people don't like? I don't really know it. I think the
Yeah.
woman's
Which
name is
one? We've had a
Dasha.
few now.
Is that her name? Is her name Dasha? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
What's the name of the show? Are they called Red Scare? Is that the Red Scare
Red
people?
Scare. Yes.
Yeah. People don't like, I don't know anything about them. But I'm sure your comment section, you had Anna Kasparian on. I'm sure your comment section was just like not a fun place to look at. But the project is moving forward. It seems like these guests haven't changed the show's vision, which I appreciate. And it's important that we continue to do shows like this and don't succumb to the algorithm.
Well, to tie a few of these things together here. So, Dasha, previous guest on the show, this is someone that I'm socially adjacent to, had known for many years before the podcast episode. There's, a cohort of artists in New York that all know each other for a long, long time. I have seen personally a lot of people cross over from that Bernie to New Right pipeline. And it's not just something that I've anecdotally observed in my personal life and friend group. I have seen that statistically through the numbers. It's kind of a lot of people who have made that crossover. And so I think there's a bigger hazard, actually, that if we're not talking to the people who have counter signaled a lot of the, proper left progressive positions that you're supposed to hold, we may be in a declining coalition where the tendency to become more inward facing and policing about what the correct belief system is, that is a symptom of something that is in a state of entropic decay, irreversible decay, where you are just slowly kind of pruning out people. And so for me, in the programming of the show and the guest list, I mean, I think we take a lot of pride in bringing on people that give the audience whiplash, so to speak. I mean, I see this in the comments, but we want to keep you kind of guessing and on your toes. And also we want to challenge your belief system, right? Because in my own experience, when I did all of those interviews in the past with young people who are getting into politics, I talked to people who had extreme ideas, in some cases ideas that I found reprehensible, grotesque, I deeply disagreed with, but I still heard them out. And having taken in that enormous gradation of politics, it made me, in subtle ways, kind of adjust my position, or maybe not adjust my position, but adjust my priority of how I plan to realize, the social democratic political economy that I would like to see in my lifetime in the United States, for example. And so to achieve that under the current conditions, I need to build an enormously broad coalition that includes such a large number of people that my pretty specific cultural values, it is just not going to be possible to have a coalition that large with a homogenous set of cultural positions, cultural identities, what have you, right? It's like if I were expecting, you know, new metal to be the genre identity of a coalition that is going to be 100 million people. I mean, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
We need to build a kind of very broad, big tent. And so talking to someone who maybe shares you know, a large set of my worldview, like Anna Kasparian you mentioned, and then maybe is different on a few other issues. I think that is someone whose vote we necessarily need to do the kind of Sanders social democratic program if we're really going to achieve that. So yeah, I think there's actually a lot to be gained, and I guess what I find is yeah, most intellectually productive is when I am challenged in my own understanding, and that friction generates growth, right? So like we talked about damage before. Dustin Guastella, I would say, routinely everything I see come down the newsfeed from this guy is like a challenge to the political assumptions that I had in like 2010 when I started to get serious about studying political economy. And a lot of times I read that stuff and I'm like, ooh, this is, I mean, some of these are really challenging. Yeah. But this is a guy who is boots on the ground, on the shop floor, is talking about if you want to realize social democracy, you know, and here's the quantitative numbers to back it up. And so that type of being challenged is really productive. And I get little moments of that when I talk to people from all over the political spectrum. So yeah, for a whole variety of reasons, I think it's useful. Yeah, as I said before, we're going to kind of go back to our base, you know, corner of familiar politics for like the foreseeable next few months. And then maybe sometime in 2026, we kind of venture out into the wilderness again and talk to some weird tech people or something like that. But
Douglas Rushkoff.
I'm glad we did it.
I'm waiting for you to nail Rushkoff. When you get to Douglas
he's
Rushkoff.
Great. Yeah. He's on the list. He's a super interesting guy.
Yeah, everything I've read from him from the last 10 years, I've loved. Costella's coming on the show next week, by the way.
Oh, damn. Yeah. He's really
time.
really fantastic. I want to get him on the show eventually. It's been, I mean, I've never worked so goddamn hard. I've got gray hair now. I didn't have it when we started the show, but we're getting a handle on it eventually.
No, I believe it. Look, I will say this again. Everything I've seen from the show, I dig. Even people I disagree with, I dig. I dig what you're doing. I dig the show. I dig the presentation. I really dig the presentation. The one-on-one interview, multiple camera show. And I keep saying all this because I want people to understand that the work that goes into putting it together is a lot, because it's the same DIY aesthetic. You're not in LA where these studios are ready to go, and they're kind of
we're carrying in the C stands and the Apple boxes. I mean, I'm personally helping to carry in the C stands and the Apple boxes. So this is a pretty scrappy joint as far as these things go. I mean, I will say that we have an incredible crew of people who all believe in this stuff, have made amazing art themselves. Like everyone involved in the show is an artist or a filmmaker. And so our aesthetic abilities and production abilities are literally at a professional level. Compensation is not. But I think it goes to show that if people believe in the project, you can do a lot, and you can kind of punch above your weight class. So I'm glad we're doing that. And I appreciate your compliments and your generosity, because it really does mean a lot. And you know, I've met a few people in this sphere in the last year, and I think audiences deserve something a little bit better in some cases. You know, I think there's a lot of kind of professionalized management PR types. I get emails literally multiple times every day now. I get a handful of these every day about some fucking I don't know, like crypto booster, or somebody wrote a book about some academic bullshit I've never even heard of and don't care. But like, there's a machine that produces this stuff, and it sucks. It's like, it's really bad. And so, yeah, I think like, I actually like the homebrewed DIY stuff. You know, this is like, there's very few things where you can like kind of have a band now in 2025, but like you and your 4 friends can be a group and make a project together. I guess doing a show is one of the few opportunities we get to do that. So it is still very meaningful.
And you get to make way more money than if you had a band.
I guess it depends on the band, but
you know,
they're kind of in the t-shirt business, is my understanding, right?
They're in the t-shirt
like, you don't make
business.
money off of movie or music.
No.
You don't make money off of streaming. You don't ticket sales. You break even. You're basically the merch table is the margin.
You are the merch table, and if you get a good gig, it's funny. Metallica forms in 1982. By 1985, 86, they're touring with Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, wow.
4 years of being in the band. Motley Crue forms around the same time. They form in like 81. By 1984, they're opening for Ozzy Osbourne. Like, there's some people that just got really lucky.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Most people did not get really lucky, and you have to DIY it for a long period of time. But through that, you know, there's integrity, and people that watch it know they're getting the quote unquote genuine article. You're not reading ads on air for BetterHelp and Magic Spoon, which means you made a decision to not do that. You're not reading ground news. The thing I hate more than anything is ground news ads. Jesus Christ, I hate that fucking shit. So the fact that you're not doing all that and you're figuring it out, you will always have my support, whatever the fuck that means. Even if it's an email that I send you every so often. Dude, good job.
No, I appreciate those emails. I like that. I mean, I think the highest praise that you can get is from people who are also making content, you know? It's to do like the you know, the people who really care about the craft is like, that is the highest compliment beyond any kind of quantitative numbers from an audience, you know?
It's all I have, you know, is
I'm used to making art, right? Like no one gives a shit about contemporary art. Like there's probably like, you know, what, 10,000 people on the entire planet that care about contemporary art. So like, I'm used to making something that I put like a whole year of work into, that maybe 150 people, if I'm lucky, come to the show and see it for a few weeks. So yeah, I mean, but I really care about the people who are, you know, invested about that stuff for years, and the history and the theory and all those things. So respect among aficionados is not lost on me. I do appreciate that.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work, and maybe one day I'll have enough shekels that I can make my way to New York and bum rush one of your shows, and then you can have 40,000 people say, "Who's that black guy?"
We'd love to do it. That'll be fun.
Just call the show, "Who's that black guy?" That's my dream come true, to go on Doom Scroll and just confuse all those people that are watching it. Like, what? He's not Mark Lamont Hill.
They'll love you. I mean, I think our audience, our core audience, like, knows the political alignment of the show, but also has like a kind of high bandwidth for maybe some of the more unconventional guests from different backgrounds. But clearly, I think you can see in the numbers that when we bring people on who are like more of, you know, our particular like class struggle milieu, that's what resonates with the core audience the most.
Oh, that, like you said, that Jen Pan interview was great. Jen Pan interview is great.
She's a huge influence. She's fantastic. Yeah.
So good. So can't stress enough. You're killing it. You guys, wherever you're watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to Josh's, actually his Substack. So if you want to read what he writes about, which is a little different than this show, he definitely gets He does descriptions of the show. If you want to read what he writes about, especially when it comes to these memetic histories, I find them fascinating because he did follow these kids for some time and follow their political trajectories. And I think as we're trying to wrap our heads around, even us that think we're so online and in tune with the online world, what was the first thing everybody did the moment Charlie Kirk got assassinated, right? Everyone was, who did it? This had to be a right winger, had to be a left guy. People are trying to get political affiliations on what the shooter was, which again, that's a new thing. Nobody asked what the Columbine shooters' political affiliations were. Didn't care. You cared about what music they listened to and you were wrong about.
Oh, right.
So Josh's work, he's one of the few people that's even looking into this. When I try to write these articles that 8 people read and you try to find information about certain things, you find out there's not a lot of people that are documenting how many black people got business licenses from 2000 to 2007. Right? So when we look at the internet and everyone thinks they know everything about Nick Fuentes, about Groypers, about do you? Have you been keeping track? Josh has. Read Josh. So that's all I have to say about that.
I appreciate that, Jason. It's very generous.
Thank you for spending 2 hours. I didn't know we were going to talk for 2 hours. So I know it's late where you are. So thank you very much. I appreciate you. And we are out.